People with heightened perception demonstrate three distinctive indicators, according to Carl Jung. But Jung discovered that this capacity to perceive everything was not a gift. It was so hazardous, it often destroyed individuals. Today, I will reveal the three unusual signs that mark someone as either extraordinary or on the verge of psychological collapse. In his clinical practice, Jung documented patients with what he termed differentiated perception. These were individuals who could read micro-expressions, sense concealed emotions, and perceive psychological patterns that eluded everyone else. They saw through social facades, detected falsehoods instantly, and felt the unconscious tensions in any environment. Jung described this discovery as perilous because these people consistently ended up isolated, exhausted, and incapable of sustaining normal relationships. Not because they were unstable, but because perceiving everything carried a psychological cost no one comprehended. This awareness was perceived as a curse, rendering them overly sensitive or excessively emotional. Here is something most people overlook about empaths and highly perceptive individuals. Society instructs them to suppress this capacity. They are instruments waiting to be honed. Every compassionate person who perceives too much learns to doubt their perceptions, to apologize for their existence, to silence themselves. But what occurs when that suppression fractures? When someone finally trusts what they have always seen? The first unusual sign reveals that these individuals are not weak victims. They are psychological geniuses in concealment. When Jung asked his patients with differentiated perception to describe their relationships, he anticipated fragmented thoughts from damaged minds. What he uncovered transformed everything he believed he knew about empaths. These patients had not been shattered by abuse. They had been studying it. Jung found that empaths maintained detailed mental records of every person who had ever harmed them. They knew their abusers' triggers, insecurities, and deepest fears. They had charted emotional patterns with surgical precision. It was as if they maintained a strategist's war room in their minds. They cataloged micro-expressions, vocal shifts, behavioral patterns. They understood the psychology of manipulation better than the manipulators themselves. They could predict outcomes, forecast relational disasters, sense betrayals months before they materialized. And here is what unsettled Jung profoundly. They had never utilized this knowledge, not once, until something compelled them past their breaking point. These empaths process emotional information more rapidly and accurately than others. Their brains are wired for pattern recognition in human behavior. Society had taught them that this ability was a curse. Every time they attempted to voice what they perceived, the lies, the manipulation, the hidden agendas, people labeled them too sensitive or overly emotional. They learned to silence themselves, to doubt their perceptions, to apologize for seeing what others could not. Jung wrote that the empath does not lose their mind from feeling excessively. They lose their mind from being informed their feelings are incorrect. He realized these individuals were not experiencing a nervous breakdown. They were undergoing a breakthrough. Their pattern recognition was not a malfunction. It was an advanced capability. The truth does not vanish just because you cease speaking it. It accumulates. The second unusual sign is even more disquieting. Because individuals with highly differentiated perception perceive others' shadows clearly, they become targets for what Jung extensively documented as shadow projection. When someone's shadow is reflected back through another person's lucid perception, the unconscious mind has two choices: integrate the shadow or attack the mirror. Jung documented this pattern repeatedly in his clinical work. The person who perceives clearly gets blamed for creating the problems they are merely observing. His patients with differentiated intuition encountered this constantly. When they would gently suggest that someone appeared troubled, that person would explode at them for being negative or creating drama. When they would express concern about evident problems, They would be accused of being judgmental or manufacturing issues where none existed. Jung realized this was not coincidence. It was a psychological defense mechanism. It is easier to attack the person reflecting your shadow than to examine what is being reflected. This creates what Jung termed the scapegoat phenomenon. Highly perceptive individuals often become the designated problem in every group they enter. Not because they instigate problems, but because they reveal problems that already exist in the collective unconscious. The bearer of superior perception becomes the repository for all that the group cannot consciously acknowledge about itself. This is the price of clear sight. Here is how you identify dangerous shadow projection in real time. First, they accuse you of motivations you never possessed with absolute certainty. They inform you what you are thinking, what you are feeling, what you are intending. And they do it with such conviction that you begin questioning your own reality. Second, they are immune to contradictory evidence. No amount of proof can dongyao their perceptions. You can explain, clarify, provide evidence, but they interpret your attempts to correct their misperceptions as further validation of their accuracy. Third, they consistently position themselves as the victim in narratives where the projector is always the innocent party. They end up in conflicts where they are always wronged, always betrayed, always suffering at the hands of others' malice. The cast of characters changes, but they remain the victim. This is how the projector unconsciously orchestrates a social attack around their own disowned qualities. The truly alarming part is how shadow projectors unconsciously recruit others into their distorted reality. Jung called this collective possession. When someone presents their projections with absolute conviction, others experience psychological pressure to align their perceptions with the projector's certainty rather than trust their own contradictory observations. This is how families turn against scapegoated members, how workplaces mob innocent employees, how communities destroy individuals based on projected accusations that have no foundation in reality. For the highly perceptive individual, this generates a reality distortion field around them. People sense something is amiss, but cannot articulate what. The empath becomes isolated, not by choice, but by the collective unconscious agreement to reject what they represent. A mirror that society cannot bear to look into. The third and most unusual sign materializes when the highly perceptive individual reaches their absolute breaking point. Jung documented what he termed shadow integration under extreme duress. The trigger was always a profound betrayal by someone they trusted. The empath would discover infidelity, financial betrayal, or emotional manipulation from their closest person. What rendered it devastating was not the act itself. It was the realization that they had seen the signs all along and disregarded them. Their pattern recognition finally overwhelmed their need to believe the best in people. And here is what transpired next. Most people would anticipate empaths to cry, to scream, to fall apart. Their abusers expected that too. They were prepared for emotional chaos. What happened instead was something that terrified everyone involved. The empaths became unnaturally calm. Jung described it as the moment the victim realizes they have been playing chess while everyone else thought it was checkers. These empaths did not attack. They did not rage. They simply began to speak truth. They revealed everything they had observed, catalogued, and silently endured. Not with cruelty, but with clinical precision, like surgeons identifying each diseased organ before removing it. This was not revenge, it was clarity. These empaths were finally utilizing their gift of complete perception, not to excuse behavior but to expose it. They stopped denying the parts of themselves they were taught to hide. Their suppressed intelligence, their silenced intuition, their denied strength. When they finally integrated these aspects of themselves, they became what Jung termed psychologically complete. Here is what rendered these cases so disturbing for Jung. The transformation was permanent. These patients did not cycle back into people-pleasing. They did not apologize for their newfound boundaries. They did not second-guess their perceptions anymore. They had become what Jung observed with profound interest, empaths who could no longer be manipulated. The changes did not cease at the psychological level. Jung documented how these individuals' entire lives transformed within months. They left abusive relationships with strategic precision. They severed contact with toxic family members without emotional drama. They rebuilt their lives on their own terms. Jung observed them becoming what he called selectively empathetic. Still deeply caring but strategically protective of where that care was directed. The most unsettling part for Jung was how these transformed empaths' presence affected others. People who had once taken advantage of them suddenly felt apprehensive around them. They could not explain why. These empaths were not aggressive or cruel, but everyone sensed something had fundamentally changed. Jung identified what he called the predator's instinct. Manipulative individuals can sense when their usual tactics will prove ineffective. They avoid integrated empaths instinctively. These individuals had become extraordinarily successful. Their businesses thrived because they could discern clients' genuine needs before they were voiced. Their new relationships were healthy because they could identify emotional predators within minutes. Their decisions were flawless because they trusted their intuitive intelligence completely. Jung realized something that gave him pause for deep reflection. These empaths had not become less empathetic. They had become perfectly empathetic, which meant they were also perfectly strategic. They could comprehend and navigate human psychology at a level that made them formidably aware in social situations. Here is what truly gave Jung profound insight. These transformed empaths chose not to employ this power destructively. They could have dismantled every person who had ever hurt them. Instead, they simply removed toxic people from their lives and progressed. Jung realized he had witnessed the emergence of what he called the integrated empath, someone with both the sensitivity to feel everything and the wisdom to choose what warranted their energy. These individuals had become what every manipulator fears most, someone who can see through them completely but no longer requires anything from them. Jung documented how their transformation compelled everyone around them to evolve or reveal their authentic nature. The healthy people in their lives grew stronger from their example. The toxic people exposed themselves through desperate attempts to pull these empaths back into old patterns. Jung observed something he termed the empath's mirror effect. These transformed individuals did not have to actively confront people's dysfunction anymore. Their mere presence reflected issues back with uncomfortable clarity. Manipulators could not endure being around them. They felt exposed, perceived transparently, unable to operate their usual psychological games. Meanwhile, authentic people felt safe with these empaths for the first time. The awakened empath becomes a living truth detector, not through judgment but through presence. The final state Jung observed was what he called love with boundaries. These individuals became selectively generous with their gifts. They could be incredibly kind to those who deserved it, and discerningly precise with those who did not. They employed their emotional intelligence strategically, not just defensively. They became what Jung privately referred to as psychological architects. People who could read, influence, and navigate human systems with exceptional precision. Jung realized these transformed empaths could no longer be victimized because they saw manipulation approaching from a distance and neutralized it before it could take root. These individuals did not merely heal themselves. They became immune to psychological abuse while preserving their capacity for genuine love and connection. They demonstrated that the empath's journey is not from sensitivity to numbness, but from unconscious absorption to conscious choice. They became not less empathetic, but more masterfully so. Here is what makes this discovery about highly perceptive individuals so significant for you. If you recognize these three signs in yourself, you are not broken. You are not too sensitive. You are not imagining things. Your superior perception is not a malfunction in your psychological makeup. It is an advanced feature of consciousness development. You are not broken because you perceive everything others miss. You are psychologically ahead of your time. The question is not whether you should suppress your perception to conform to collective unconsciousness. The question is whether you will cultivate the skills necessary to integrate your perception consciously. Jung's work offers a path from dangerous isolation to conscious service, from overwhelming perception to integrated wisdom, from psychological burden to evolutionary contribution. You were born to perceive everything, not to suffer in silence, but to serve the evolution of consciousness. The world requires your insights, but it needs them delivered with the integration, wisdom, and strategic awareness that transform hazardous perception into a healing influence. Your gift is not your burden. Your unconscious relationship to your gift is your burden. Learn to integrate it consciously, and you become exactly what Jung believed highly perceptive individuals were meant to be. Consciousness pioneers preparing humanity for a psychological development that is inevitable but not yet widely recognized. Your superior perception is not a malfunction. It is not a curse. It is the mark of someone who processes reality at a more profound level than most. The three unusual signs Jung identified: the strategic mind hidden beneath kindness, the susceptibility to shadow projection, and the powerful transformation into integration, are not warnings of pathology. They are stages of evolution. The goal is not to perceive less, but to perceive more wisely and consciously. Jung spent decades studying patients who seemed gentle and fragile until something within them shifted. His research proved that the empath's journey is not about becoming less sensitive. It is about becoming consciously sensitive. And consciousness, Jung realized, is what transforms victims into forces of nature. The most beautiful part of Jung's findings: these transformed empaths never lost their capacity for love. They just learned to love themselves as fiercely as they once loved others. If you are an empath or highly sensitive person experiencing these signs, remember Jung's essential discovery. Your sensitivity is not your weakness. It is your strength. And the day you learn to wield it consciously is the day you become truly powerful. Not dangerous to innocent people, but formidable to those who would exploit your gifts. That is precisely what the world needs more of. Empaths who know their worth, trust their perceptions, and refuse to dim their light for anyone's comfort. People with heightened perception who have integrated their shadows, who see clearly without being destroyed by what they see, who love deeply without losing themselves. This is not a curse, but an evolutionary step. Your sensitivity is your strength wielded consciously. If you recognize yourself in these three unusual signs, share your experience in the comments. Sometimes recognizing these patterns in our past can protect us in our future. Your journey of integration connects with others walking the same path.